Now, so yesterday you will hopefully remember that I started to encourage you to think about how you frame your idea, your product, your technology, whatever that is. If you have one now, or if you perhaps have one or will have one in the future. But it's looking at it through the lens of the customer, and thinking about what we called or what we described the customer jobs, pains, and gains. And we use tools like the value proposition canvas to crystallize our thinking around that from a assumptions perspective. And then obviously we covered off the business model canvas and how that can be used as a tool to create value for your business. But everything that you will use at this very early stage is you're hypothesizing. You're trying to come up with your best guess as to what should be in the various sections of those tools. And as I indicated to you, these tools are very powerful when they're used as tools, as opposed to tick box exercises, or just something that you complete to keep someone else happy. So when you use them as a tool, you're using them to validate your assumptions, or indeed to invalidate your assumptions, or to come up with new information that you weren't aware of prior to embarking upon a journey. And that journey is one of market validation through customer discovery. And so this is what we're going to cover off today. This is a summary approach, if you like, to capturing, structuring, and interpreting stakeholder insights to validate whether there actually is a market need for what you're proposing, and to better understand those customer jobs. Okay. Before we start, has anyone any questions about what we covered yesterday? Just conscious that within a 2-hour session, we covered a lot of ground, particularly for anyone who has never come across these tools before. So there was a lot to process, there was a lot to digest. And any questions before we move on to this next stage? I'm happy to take those.
Kieran, just some of the class I've mentioned there, just do you know how you can see the rectangles where it's just covering some of the content there?
Yeah, I moved that around just so you could see that. This is really just so that I can see you all. I can see what, for those of you that have the cameras on, I can see the whites of your eyes. But look, I'll be very wary of ensuring that this little box isn't on top of any key information. So if I see that, I'll be moving it. So don't worry about that. So no questions. Good. Hopefully that means you all have a very clear and deep understanding of the subject matter. Okay, so what's next? Is your job to validate your product? Is your job to validate your product? I wouldn't mind. Do you want to just pop your answer into the chat there for me, please? Okay, we have some answers coming in here. Not yet. No. To find a fit. To a certain extent. Yes, 100%. Yes. Through engaging the customers. I'm guessing that's a yes as well. Okay. A mix of responses there. So it's not your job to validate your product, is the response. Perhaps not the response that some of you were looking for. The next question then is, well, is your job to validate the problem and how best to solve it? So I think you can tell what direction I'm headed here. So I don't necessarily need a response, but I'm liking it 100% yes. So it's not your job to validate your product, primarily. It is your job to validate the problem and how best to solve it, 100%. So you must not try to validate what you already think or want to be true. That's an important consideration. You're all involved. Well, sorry, for those of you that have ideas, or for those of you that are involved in research areas and developing interesting solutions, you know, we're, and quite often at this early stage, you could describe what you're doing as solutions looking for problems. And it's very important that we get to the point where your solutions or your ideas are aligned with the problem. And for those of you that have been working in this area perhaps for some time, there is I suppose, an emotional connection to what you're doing. So you need to be mindful of that. As I said yesterday, when you pull together your value proposition canvas and when you pull together your business model canvas and you come up with all of your assumptions, you're hypothesizing right across the board, more than half of your assumptions will not be as you thought they were. Okay, and maybe not go to the extreme level of describing them as wrong, but they will be challenged. They need to be challenged, and they will change, and that's a guarantee. So customer discovery, what is it? Customer discovery is having meaningful conversations. So you're interacting with others to exchange information and better understand the problems. Remember those customer pains and the gains, or perhaps we could frame them as opportunities, if they exist. So there's no assumption that they do exist. You're going out there with a very high level of curiosity to determine if they exist, and any likely challenges or barriers to those. Okay, customer discovery, just to be clear, and I deliver this type of training on a number of programs, and there's I call it a path of least resistance approach here that some people like to adopt, whereby they're sending out surveys or trying to put a survey or a number of questions out on LinkedIn looking for tick box responses, or even looking for a little bit of qualitative response by a survey or an email. That's not what customer discovery is about, just to be clear. And you won't get the same level of rich information, insights, and feedback from a survey that you will having a meaningful conversation in customer discovery mode. So I mentioned that, this is all about shifting your perspective from product-centric, whatever that product is, or service-centric, whatever that service is, or technology-centric, whatever that technology is, to customer-centric. Okay, so the technical mind is very tempted to think about what can we sell to customers. What relationships do we need to establish with customers? How can we make money from customers? That tends to be the old-fashioned entrepreneur mindset, if you like, and certainly the technical person's mindset who has an interesting idea. So you've got to shift from that mindset to one of what relationship do our customers expect us to establish with them? What jobs do our customers need to get done, and how can we help them? How can we live up to a customer's expectations? How do our customers prefer to be addressed? How do we, as a potential enterprise or a startup, best fit into their routines? For what value are customers truly willing to pay? So this is where we need to get very curious around all of this. But ultimately, we are beholden to the customer. And it's very important to get inside the customer's head. So from the outset, customer discovery, we need to be thinking about, well, who should you be speaking to in the context of your idea? Where do you find them? How do you get speaking to them? And when you do get speaking to them, or if you do get speaking to them, what do you say to them? These are all important considerations in customer discovery, and this is what we're going to cover today. And just a reminder that you know we do this a lot. I personally probably have 200 conversations a year with the market around various technology types in customer discovery mode. After our session yesterday, I had a customer discovery conversation with Edelman, which is one of the largest marketing and communications companies in the world, around a technology that's coming out of an Irish university. So how will you get speaking to them? So for those of you that haven't done this before, for those of you that are new to this, there will be an element of getting outside your comfort zone, as I suppose with any new activity. You know, you're pushing yourself into an area that you haven't been involved in before. So that can be a little daunting for some people. But then obviously if you've been doing it, if you've done it before, or if you do it quite often, then it's second nature, and it's relatively easy once you know how to do it correctly. The one thing that I will say is, and this is a very important consideration in customer discovery, is confirmation bias. I've already mentioned that, you know, for some of you with ideas, you're emotionally connected to those ideas, and there is a lean towards wanting to be right, wanting all of your own assumptions or your own aspirations or your own ambitions to be aligned with the market without actually considering, well, what does the market want? So you need to be careful in customer discovery mode, paying attention to information which confirms what you believe, whilst ignoring information that challenges your preconceived notions. Me going out as a consultant, obviously, you know, for the most part, no vested interest. I'm interested in pursuing the truth, regardless of how much my clients want me to come back with something that confirms their belief. I'm going back to them with something that will ensure that they don't spend time and effort wasting time and effort developing something that nobody wants. But that said, I will try and better understand other applications, perhaps, that would allow for a route forward, perhaps not the route forward that had been originally intended. So this approach of confirmation bias, or this issue of confirmation bias, can cause you to think and listen selectively, and can distort your active pursuit of facts. I've been on a call recently within the last 6 months with a researcher, and we had a call with a large bank, UK bank, and you know, the call, shall we say, I suppose validated the fact that they didn't really have a market need, and they were covered off in terms of how they were currently doing things, and they were very happy with how they were doing things. So after the call, myself and the researcher had a quick chat, and you know, I sort of summarized my thoughts around the conversation. And this researcher had a very different idea. She thought, no, absolutely, I think there's opportunity there, for X, Y, and Z reasons. So, like, even though she heard it from the horse's mouth, and that, you know, that they were very pleased with how they were doing things, and that they've been working on this for a number of years now, etc., etc. That confirmation bias and that filter that she adopted still led her to believe that there might be something there when I was pretty clear that there wasn't. And so you're stepping out of a development phase or an ideation phase, and you're engaging the market in customer discovery mode. So you're having you're having meaningful conversations with potential customers, maybe, with experts or key opinion leaders. And quite often at the beginning of a commercial feasibility, I will go out and look to see if I can find any experts or key opinion leaders who will have a sort of a helicopter view of a lot of what's going on, and obviously have deep domain expertise in some of the problems and challenges. And they can be very useful to speak with at the beginning of the project, because they can point you in directions that might save some time, you trying to figure that out yourself at the beginning. Regulation, if regulation applies to your idea, it can be useful to speak with the regulators. Suppliers or organizations within the supply chain can be useful to speak to. Partners or potential partners, or potential resellers, or people that are active in the market in some shape or form. And quite often competitors can be good to speak with. And generally speaking, and you'll hear me say this in subsequent slides, generally speaking, you are not sharing the how of your idea. You are only sharing the what of your idea. And quite often competitors are very happy to have conversations, particularly if you're based in a university, because for some reason they don't perceive you as being a threat. You are, and you can take full advantage of that badge of being an undergrad at a university, or being a postgrad at a university, or being a postdoc researcher at a university. So you can take full advantage of all of that, whereby they don't view you as much of a threat as they might their direct competitors, companies that are actually up there and trading. But fundamentally, you're validating or trying to validate those assumptions about the commercial potential or about the market need of your idea. Okay, this is a simple example. I worked on a project going back probably about 2 years ago now, and it was a piece of software that was housed in a hub. And the focus was on ensuring that more renewable energy was being used within the mix, if you like, or was being deployed within the mix for large manufacturing plants, perhaps, or even domestic homes. So you're pulling from the grid, and you're pulling from your own renewable assets like solar PV or wind, or whatever renewable assets, air pump, or whatever renewable assets you have. But you're, I suppose, wholly beholding on whether those are generating energy and whether you have adequate storage. So this was trying to ensure that you were utilizing more of your renewable assets and less reliant on the grid. So it's an optimization play that was focused on reducing energy bills. So I went out and I spoke to. So my fundamental approach, generally speaking, is okay. Well, what categories do I need to speak with? What categories of organizations? So setting up my categories, and then listing underneath organizations that would fall within those categories before I start targeting those organizations. Now, these were the organizations, or indeed the individuals in some cases, that got speaking to. Generally speaking, your target list will be a lot longer than the people that you actually get speaking to, because not everyone will either A, come back to you, or B, be open to having a conversation in the first place. Now, who? So within any organization, there can be a hierarchy of individuals, and it's important to have a think about, that hierarchy, because you will have the economic buyer, you'll have the people that hold the budget, but they may not be the decision makers. You might have the initiators and the people that are charged with exploring the market for a solution, but they may not hold the budget, and they may not be the decision maker. You can have influencers who can have an influence on whether something is purchased or not. But again, they may not hold sway. And you could have end users who have maybe no influence on the overall decision. And this happens quite often, obviously, in healthcare, where the end user as patients tend to have little influence on solutions that are adopted by healthcare organizations. And within all of that, you could have saboteurs, that could scupper the whole thing for whatever reason, political or otherwise. So these are important considerations, particularly when you're engaging with large organizations. Again, with other types of organizations, it can be a simpler consideration whereby it's a single point of contact. But the relationship between a lot of these individuals within organizations can be quite complex, particularly in healthcare. And there's a lot of figuring out to do. So you might want to be just mindful of that. And that's just a list of some of them, if you like, and who they are and what their role is. Another one could be system integrators, and the other one that I'll cover off now in a few minutes is like industry associations. I've already mentioned experts and key opinion leaders, and in some cases it could be researchers or people that have a strong reputation globally from researching the whole topic, and they can sometimes be very useful to speak with as well. I remember doing a project for a technology that was focused on addressing healthcare acquired infections within hospital settings, and I spoke to the director of environmental services in a large hospital group in the US, and we had a very good conversation around the customer jobs, pains, and gains. And having had that conversation, I asked the question of him, well, who would have the budget or who would make the decision around the purchase of this type of solution? And he said, well, I hold the budget. Now, this person was probably in charge of, he probably had a team of about 200 or 250 people. And he had a budget of, had to be measured in millions, if not tens of millions. But he said, I wouldn't make the decision. He said, I would have to pull together a case, depending on the spend levels, obviously. But I would have to pull together a case, and that case will go to my boss. And my boss would make the call on whether the purchase is made or not. So these are important considerations in any large organization. And it'll be important for you, A, to know who the decision makers are and what the relationship is between them and the budget holders, and perhaps even have conversations with both of those. But certainly you'd want to be asking the budget holder, well, what is the criteria typically, or what's important to your decision maker in making that decision, or in making the decision to purchase. So again, coming back to generative AI, so you can use Barry.
Hi, Kieran. How are you doing?
I'm good. Go ahead there.
Loving the classes, by the way, and the content. Thanks a million. Question
No bother. Thank
in
you.
regards to what you just said there, that you to be careful about, or to be aware of the different peoples within an organization. Some people hold the budget, other people make the decision. What did you find in that example? Who made the final decision, or ultimately, from your experience within healthcare, whether it's private or public, who usually makes those decisions? Or sorry, you said you to find out what's important to the decision maker. What did you find was important to
In that case, the what was important was return on investment. So
even
you know,
public?
in that that was a private hospital care, or care group, hospital care group in the US.
Okay.
And what was important there was the return on investment. So knowing what was the current spend to control hospital-acquired infections, and having some accurate prediction of how much this solution would save them, in the controls that they were having to put in place to reduce or minimize hospital-acquired infections. That's fundamentally what it came down to
Okay.
in that case. Now, we weren't in sales mode, so it wasn't a case where we were trying to secure that customer. We were in information gathering mode. So it was in gathering all of that information from various hospital groups in Ireland, in the UK, in Holland, and in the US, to come to a view as to whether there actually was a market need for the solution as proposed or not. But that, for that particular organization, it fundamentally came down to, as would be the case in a lot of US organizations, where they're very blunt around return on investment.
So the numbers. All right. Thanks a million.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No problem at all, Barry. So look, again, I mentioned yesterday that generative AI can be used to help with this overall process. And so, you can go into something like ChatGPT and you can put a good description of your idea. Here's one from an Irish university. Just a very simple description: development of a self-powered fabric-based sensor for monitoring joint biomechanics. So I'm asking ChatGPT in this case, please provide me with 3 key categories of organizations to speak with and why. Now, I could add in there in customer discovery mode, but ChatGPT will know once I refer to customer jobs, pains and gains, and insights into value adoption, integration, and purchasing, that this is very relevant to customer discovery. And so it has that prior knowledge, if you like, of what customer discovery is and what customer jobs, pains and gains are. And just throwing in a line, if you have any queries before answering, please ask, just in case. As I said yesterday, it's programmed to give you a response without questioning, but you can give it an opportunity to ask some questions in case a clarification might help the response that it gives. And so it's given me a number of categories here: orthopedic and physiotherapy clinics, elite sports teams and performance institutes, and insurers and occupational health organizations. And in each case, it's given me a why. So it's gone into a little bit of detail to say, okay, so these are frontline health providers directly monitoring and rehabilitating joint function in patients with injuries, arthritis, post-op recovery, or neuromuscular conditions. It'll give me a sense then of what their customer jobs are, what they're trying to achieve, in other words, as we discussed yesterday. It's given me a sense of the pains that they're experiencing currently. Again, we don't take this at full face value. We'll look at this, we'll read this, we'll reflect on it, we'll come to a view as to whether we believe these might be correct or not. But ultimately, they are assumptions. So if you're coming up with an assumption around this sort of stuff, you automatically believe that ChatGPT is giving you assumptions as well. These aren't facts, and this is certainly not validated information. Okay, but what this is a first pass that gives you enough information to go out there and validate it. Haven't challenged this yourself. Okay, so the market's going to challenge this information. And this is just indicative stuff. Obviously, you can go into the likes of ChatGPT and look for a longer list of customer jobs for each of these customer segments. You can look for a longer list of pains and gains, but ultimately you're going to be challenging them at all times. And then, as I say, you're going to be going out there to the market, speaking to some of these organizations, and that's the open question. Look, you should have these slides anyway. These slides are available to you. I think they're on the website. Anna, yeah?
Yep, they should be going up every day. I'll double check that from yesterday as well.
Yeah. So you should have those. So look, this is this category. There's another category here, which is elite sports teams and performance institutes. And you can see here, the customer jobs, pains and gains. So the logic is quite different. These organizations invest heavily in athlete monitoring, injury prevention, performance optimization, but they can be very good early adopters for high performance tech because they're always looking at and looking for the one percenters, if you like, that can help make that difference to a team. If it is a team or an athlete, if it's an athlete, in this case, customer jobs, monitoring athlete biomechanics, preventing injuries, and optimizing training regimes. They have pains, bulky or intrusive gear. So a lot of the present state technology is bulky. They'd like, something that's perhaps a little more wearable, a little less intrusive. Perhaps they might have limited real-time data for lots of different reasons, or difficulty tailoring load and movement feedback for play, where the idea that this fabric-based sensor, which covers the skin, covers the joint, might offer a value proposition. But we can make assumptions around those value propositions, and then go out there and understand, well, how do they do it now? Okay, and similarly, insurers always motivated to reduce claims, to monitor recovery, to assess injury risk, etc., etc. And that could be in workplace environments, or it could be in other environments as well. So look, this is just a starter for 6, as I indicated yesterday, but it can be a good starting point, getting you over that blank page challenge, and it gives you something to work towards. So look, for those of you with ideas, what I'd like you to do is take 5 minutes to have a think about what categories will you need to target. And can you name any organizations under those categories? And look, for these exercises, similarly to yesterday with the verbal business card and the value proposition assumptions, I know you have, there's an allocation of time that you are devoting to the project, to the InnoBoost project overall. And obviously, in delivering these sessions, that's a part of that time. But I think there's an expectation that perhaps you'd go off and do a little bit more in your own time. So if I could encourage you for yesterday to have a go again at your verbal business card if you have an idea, and your value proposition assumptions. Again, if you have an idea. And similarly, or if you don't have an idea, just pick an idea. Come up with something, invent something that it would allow you to work through these practices and adopt the learning and achieve the learning outcomes. And similarly, maybe for today or after today, I'm asking you to take 5 minutes on this now, but 5 minutes obviously won't do it justice. But it'll allow you to start thinking about it when it's all fresh in your mind. But what I would encourage you to do is download the slides and then have a look at some of these exercises and have a go at them in your own time. The value proposition assumptions will serve you well in pulling together the business model canvas that we've asked you to pull together for next Monday. And similarly, The customer segments will require categories of organizations that you need to target, and perhaps some suggestion on what organizations you can name, or some organizations you can name under each category. And again, you can plug that into your business model canvas in that far right hand column. Okay, so do you want to just take 5 minutes to have a go at this, please? And any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or feel free to turn off your or turn on your mic, I beg your pardon, and ask the question. How many people have we on today, Anna?
Including ourselves, 14, so 12.
Okay, so we are a relatively small group. So look, feel free to turn on your mic and ask the question if there's a burning question you'd like me to respond to.
I'm just going to pause the recording then.
Hello. I was thinking about value chain, because I know how value chain does have its trickle effect in the whole economy. And in terms of circular economy, I know that when all of this is put in place, it would impact it greatly. So I'm thinking of processing of agricultural processing, kind of. Yes.
You're thinking of, sorry, Janet, I missed the question. So you're thinking of value chain as it applies to a process within agriculture.
Yes, exactly.
And do you have a specific question just in relation to that?
More like to advance processing such that wastes are like put in the value chain and then recycled, such that sustainability can be, put in the picture more effectively.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, and I've worked on a few projects that are looking at that. So you're valorizing a waste stream or a side stream, and trying to add value to that side stream, whereby you where it can be deployed in a way that will allow for a better return. So it'd be very important for you to consider the present state. So what currently happens to that waste stream? Is it disposed of? Is there a cost associated with disposing of it? Or is it used for some low value application whereby the return is quite low, and you'd like to increase the value of that return? But it'll be very important for you to understand the metrics around all of that. So how, like for example, I'm doing one at the minute, actually presently, for a research performing organization in Ireland, whereby they are using rhubarb waste. So rhubarb, I'm sure you're all familiar with. You're using rhubarb waste to develop absorbent pads for the meat industry and for the berry or fruit industry. So taking a waste product that currently has zero value and turning it into something that has potentially higher value, but it also has a number of it has higher value because it has a number of functional aspects. And one of the functional aspects is that it has the potential to increase shelf life, because there's an antimicrobial aspect to certain aspects of the rhubarb. But I'm out there having to speak with the rhubarb growers to understand the volume and how often it might be available throughout the year, and how it's currently processed, and what costs are involved in processing it, if there is a process, and what they do with it, etc., etc. And I'm also then having to speak with the meat industry and understand what they currently use, what the cost of that is, what their motivation for perhaps a more sustainable solution is, what, their shelf life, what shelf life they're currently getting, what desire or motivation is there for a longer shelf life, why, so yeah, I completely understand, Janet, what you're trying to achieve, and I think there's lots of very interesting conversations that you could be having to validate or invalidate the market need for what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So much.
It does. Brilliant. Just take another couple of minutes. Try and come up with your categories and any organizations that you can name under each category. And they might be large organizations, small organizations. Okay. We'll maybe stop there. And I suppose I'll ask the question, does anyone want to volunteer their categories or any organizations they've come up with? Barry,
Yeah, I don't mind getting it started.
go ahead there.
So my idea is a VR device that monitors brainwave
Brainwaves.
frequencies for stress and task assessment. I used your prompt there and put it into ChatGPT, and it came
Uh-huh.
up with 3 different segments. One being the corporate employers, HR and wellness department. The second one being healthcare providers like occupational health psychologists and physiotherapists. And then the
Yeah.
third one being education and, training organizations.
Okay. And what's your sense of what it's given you? Barry, would you be aligned with that, or would you disagree?
Do you know what? I have to confess, I took part in the Student Inc. program over the summer, so I've kind of gone through
Ah,
before, and however, my idea is slightly different now. So I would agree definitely with the corporate, um, which is what I did my customer discovery
yeah,
on mainly. However, healthcare providers and education and training were just a little bit, yeah, I kind of backed away from them just because they were a lot more difficult to penetrate. I guess the corporate side was the low hanging fruit, and there seemed to be more opportunity there to kind of to conduct that customer discovery. But
yeah,
in relation to what it gave me then for that one, it said why they face increasing challenges with employee stress, burnout, and productivity. I
yeah.
would agree with that. A lot of statistics show that this is the case, and yeah. Sorry, am I talking too much now? I
No,
feel.
no, 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 you're good. No, look, I know. Okay, then, and your name did when I seen your name there, I thought that I recognized it. So obviously we've overlapped before. And look, and you'd be very familiar with a lot of this stuff. Then, I actually might get you to deliver a part of it now before the end of the day.
Well,
I'm joking, yeah. I'm joking, yeah. But no, so you will then you have a full appreciation of the fact that this is coming up with very basic assumptions, and it's your job then to go out and validate or invalidate. So it sounds to me like you've done some validation around the segments to
yeah,
say, well, the customer jobs and pains and gains are more relevant to what I'm doing within this segment than they
yeah,
are within this segment, and you have a logic there, you have a reason there, and you haven't had these conversations, you're very clear around where there's a greater opportunity, so you can see the value customer discovery to help you achieve that.
Yeah, and I've gone through that process, and it's definitely, yeah, what I'm seeing here was validated for that corporate
Brilliant.
department for sure.
Brilliant. Great. Well, look, I hope to. I know we're all hooking up. In Ireland, the Irish participants of the program are all hooking up. In a month or so. So hopefully I'll see you there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll see if I
Brilliant.
get accepted.
Right. Oh no, talk nice to Anna there. Okay. Anyone else want to have a chat about what they've come up with from a categories perspective or an organization's under each category perspective? No pressure.
Yeah, Sean here.
Sean, hi.
Hello, Kieran. My area of interest is in environmental education and engaging with schools, scouts, and active retirement, maybe, and tourists, and maybe even the corporate sector. So those are the categories, the broad spread of categories. And I suppose in terms of organizations, then I suppose I probably want to be making connections with maybe the Primary Teachers Association, Scouts Ireland, and Active Retirement Ireland, and Bodge Ireland. But I think also I see currently an issue around the costs of transport, and how can I overcome the cost of transport. And I'm probably going to need to engage with maybe a marketing agency to support me in getting my market segmentation and all of that. And
Sean, are you in a position to say what problem you're solving?
what problem am I solving?
Hmm.
Yes, well, for the schools, it is kind of like relating to the discover primary science at the primary school level. At the secondary school level, it is providing the platform for the students to get hands-on activities on Leaving Cert biology, ecology on site.
So the problem is that the skills or the knowledge of the topic are not available within schools currently, and there's a demand for that.
There's the demand for access to outdoor space to be able to carry out experiments and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be interested to drill into that. And tell me, in terms of the categories you've come up, did you come up with those yourself, or did you use generative AI?
Well, it's all my own thinking.
All your own thinking. Okay, good. And can you see the value in just trying to adopt a structured approach, if you like, to understanding the categories that would be very useful for you to speak with?
Absolutely. But then
Okay.
I suppose maybe you'll be covering it further is targeting the different segments and in different approaches to target different segments. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We will surely. Now, you'll hear me say this, Sean. We're targeting not in sales mode. So this is very much, first of all, trying to understand the customer jobs, pains, and gains. Sales will only come about way down the track when you've established actually that there is a market need and that you have a value proposition, hopefully a unique value proposition.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Folks, thanks a million. We'll move on. So how do you find them? I suppose, as with anything, when you're looking for someone to speak with, you'll explore your own network. Who do you know? Or who do the people you know? Who does your network know? You will conduct online desk research, of course, Google and other sources. There's market reports. I'll cover this in a subsequent slide. There's industry association membership directories. There's speakers at themed events, etc. LinkedIn is obviously a very good source of people and finding people and knowing what organizations people work for and what their roles are. So obviously, you know, you've got to find these people. You've got to identify them first of all, know who they are. Invariably, cold calling will be required, and I teach this quite a lot to people in terms of how you go out there and engage and cold call. And you know, I do this in programs like Student Inc. that Barry's told us about, and there's a program in Ireland called New Frontiers, which is for knowledge-based entrepreneurs. You know, so invariably taking people from being in a position where they're not used to doing this to actually doing it, and then having conversations with them periodically as to how they're getting on and you know what progress they're making and getting the conversations and what type of feedback they're getting back. But fundamentally, you know, you're going to be talking to strangers, and that doesn't come easy to everyone. But as with everything, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But your approach needs to be planned. Cold calling is more effective when used in conjunction with emails, in my view. I think LinkedIn's an excellent prospecting tool in terms of going out there and identifying, but I don't believe it's a particularly good tool for the reach outs. So whilst it has an in-mail function and a messaging function, I don't believe that it's as effective as email itself. But you can send messages if you are struggling, if you like to find an email address. You can send messages to people, and if you have a premium or a paid account, even you know, I think LinkedIn will offer you a free subscription for a short period of time. You know, you can send in messages via LinkedIn as well, but it's not as good as LinkedIn, or it's not as good as email. And quite important if you are connecting with people on LinkedIn that you just update your LinkedIn profile to ensure that it reflects who you are, essentially. You know, you're connecting with people, perhaps putting in a little message in the connect request, and that message, you know, you want your profile to reflect your message. So the whole concept of, let me just read a message here. How do we tackle proposing optimizations instead of solving a problem? How do you convince a client of the potential added value with limited track record beyond experimentation? Well, you're going to have the conversation with the client to understand what they do right now. Ayman, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Oh, good. So you're going to have the conversation with them around how they do what they do now in the context of your idea. And so that's an important consideration. So if they currently have a process like manual assembly of engineered product, you know, so how do they do what they do now? And look at that from an end-to-end perspective. And so they recruit assembly workers, they train assembly workers. There's a time element to that in terms of the amount of resource and expenditure to get them trained up. They're deployed on the job. Some of them work very efficiently, perhaps others don't work as efficiently. And there are reasons for that you'd want to dig into, perhaps. You know, there are quality issues, perhaps, that might arise as a result of people doing the jobs to differing quality levels. You'd want to understand those quality issues what are they? How often do they arise? What are the consequences of them? Et cetera, et cetera. You know, so if you're coming along with an idea that optimizes, you want to understand the present state first of all, and all of the issues. You know, what is the customer trying to achieve? Simple. Coming back to the value proposition canvas, what is the customer trying to achieve? What are the pains that they're experiencing? Do those pains chime with what you're considering from an optimization perspective? So in other words, are those aspects that you can optimize, are they important to a client or a customer? Would I propose covering a base of clients in this situation or modifying the solution to fit the first client according to your experience? Of course, I would engage in a comprehensive customer discovery journey where I would go out and I would have 20, 25 conversations with organizations that might fit the bill of needing what you're proposing. But my big focus would be on trying to understand the present state. How do they do things now? What are they trying to achieve now? You know, because ultimately, if they don't, if like, for example, you might have a company, like, say, for example, a pharmaceutical company, that is selling products, and those products are high value, and they're making lots of money. Their gross margin is very high. You know, their net margin is very, very high. Their net profit is very, very high. You're coming in with something that might create a, you know, 1% increase in efficiency. But the difference that will make to the gross margin or the net margin could be very, very minuscule. And they may not be overly motivated to adopt your solution. But you need to understand the present state, first of all, to enable you to know whether they would have a need for what you're proposing or not. But the flip side of that is you might have an organization that has quite low margins, you know, and the process is quite cumbersome or quite manual. And they'll be very motivated for a solution that could optimize that or could automate that or could reduce cost of quality or could, you know, so, but the approach will be to go out there and to speak to people to understand the present state, to understand what they're trying to achieve, to understand the pains that they're experiencing and the consequence of those pains, to understand the gains that they're looking for. Not even mentioning your solution. Not even mentioning your solution. But once you have a full and deep understanding of all of that, then you're in a position to know whether your solution might fit in or not. And that should always form the first part of the conversation. And I'll cover that in terms of how we structure conversations as well. Just introducing you to the whole concept of what I would call virtual watering holes. So a watering hole obviously is where lots of people congregate or lots of animals congregate, depending on the context. But from a virtual watering hole perspective, it's useful to think about where are there lots of people congregating that you could perhaps be having conversations with, or that you could at least identify those individuals. And in this case, LinkedIn groups, you know, you have LinkedIn groups under various themes. And if your idea is in, for example, the intelligent transport systems space, then joining that group could be a good thing for you to do, because it'll give you a long list of people that have an interest in that space. And some of those might be people that would be good for you to speak with. Like this group has a huge number, 37,000. Obviously, that could be hard to wade through. But you can go in there and you can start searching through that list, putting in keywords, etc. If you have an idea that's in the new mothers space or the expecting mothers space, here's a link or a Facebook group that has lots of people that have an interest in that space, and those people might be new mothers or expecting mothers, or they might be people that provide services or organizations that provide services to new mothers or expecting mothers. But ultimately, it could be a good group for you to join if that's where your idea might have application. And there's what, nearly 5,500 members in that group. Some segments have associations, membership associations. This is a segment that's focused on hologram suppliers and manufacturers. I did a project on holograms at one stage, and every single hologram manufacturer in the world is a member of this association. So it was quite a find to allow me to go speaking, identifying them and speaking with them. Everyone is listed, and in fairness to this particular association, there's contact details for the vast majority of them as well. So, you know, even if this individual isn't the right individual to speak with, it gave me a lot to go on in terms of the email format. And obviously I could then jump onto LinkedIn and search that company's employee list and see what I could figure out. Conferences. Conferences can be quite a good way of identifying people. Because people who are quite knowledgeable on various areas, you know, tend to put themselves up to speak, or can be identified as speakers, or can get involved in panel discussions. And so it can be a good way of finding good people to speak with. This particular one is a diagnostics one that, you know, and I've done some work in the diagnostic space. This is in the UK, focused on the National Health Service in the UK. And here you can see, you know, here's 3 people that for me were very relevant on a particular topic. So I had who they speak with, who they work for, I have their names, and that allows me to go way off and see if I can find out what their contact details are. This another one, infection prevention and control. I've already mentioned that hospital-acquired infection project that I worked on. So again, just coming onto a site like this to see who the people are. You know, there's a long list of speakers, and through both of the examples that I've given, I had conversations with people that were listed on the website. So you can view these people, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, you can go off and look them up, you can get the email format of the organizations they work for. Market reports. So, you know, these market reports are quite expensive. You know, you could pay something like 4,000 or 5,000 for a market report, but online they do give you little samples of the information that's available within the market report, and that can be enough, if you like, to allow you to go off and start doing your own digging. So, for example, in this one, a project I did on a new type of spot welding technology, and here was a market report on resistance spot welding, and this gives me a list of companies. And so, like, you know, prior to working on the project, I had no idea what companies were active in the spot welding space. But this gave me a good list of some companies that I could go off and look up and explore further. It also gave me good information around the size of the market presently and the forecasted size of the market in a number of years' time, which is good information to get. And it's CAGR, which is its compound annual growth rate. So year on year, this market is growing at roughly 5.5%. And so again, that's good information to get. So just coming back to generative AI, or even, you know, so I've already mentioned LinkedIn as a good way of identifying people and figuring out the roles and putting in keywords, etc. what you could do if you wanted to is you could go into ChatGPT, for example, or Grok, and look, or Gemini, and look up, development of self-powered fabric-based sensor for monitoring joint applications. I'm not going to get you to do this as an exercise now because we're over time, but like for this technology as described, provide me with what roles or positions should I target to validate or invalidate the customer jobs, pains, and gains for the elite sports teams and performance institutes use case. So they've given me a segment previously in my previous prompt. I'm just taking that segment and saying, okay, what roles or positions should I target? And you could say, and why? And if you have any questions, then before answering, please ask. So, this gives me then head of sports science or performance director. And why? Because they set the strategy for athlete monitoring, they select the technologies, they oversee integration with coaching and medical teams, etc., etc. And what insights might I expect to gain from them? So they're strategic in the jobs to be done. They improve training loads, prevent injuries, key pain points around fragmented or inaccurate data, etc., etc. Strength and conditioning coaches, and the why and the insights are all combined there as well. Team physiotherapists, sports therapists, etc., etc., and the why all listed out there as well. Again, you never take it at face value. You bring your own sort of perspective to bear, but it's a good starter for 6. And you can then go into LinkedIn and start looking up some of these titles, job titles, or look up organizations that are active in this space, and within those organizations, you'll have and I'll show you now, you'll have a list of employees. LinkedIn's very powerful. For this, I use it a lot for customer discovery. If you know the name of the person, obviously you can just go search them. If you don't know them, you can search the company, having done a bit of digging to determine what companies would be good to speak with, what categories and what companies, etc., etc. You can search for individuals, even just through keywords and job titles. So simple one here is I was working on a project on harvesting energy from vibrations, and from a market report, Apache Rail jumped out as an organization that would be good to speak with, and I wanted to speak to someone in maintenance and someone quite senior. So I plugged in a couple of keywords here, that allowed me to generate a list of employees and a list of people that had some link with maintenance and who were quite senior. And I came across this individual, and you just simply connect with them. And I put a little sort of personal message in there. And just something very simple that chimes with what I'm looking for. You work for a university, you're developing solutions which have some form of value or address a problem, and you can hint at the problem. I believe you're an expert in this field. I'd appreciate your advice and insight. And here's an email, an actual email that I sent out. So it just gives you a sense of the structure of the email that you would send out. First of all, you're never in sales mode. So you're trying to ensure that that comes across very clearly. So for me, I work as a consultant. So I'm sitting here and assessing the market for a new technology that may address challenges related to endoscope procedure delays in hospitals. It's been developed by Trinity College Dublin in collaboration with St James's Hospital Dublin. St James's is the largest hospital in Ireland and the busiest endoscopy unit in Ireland. So you can see there, I'm trying to get a little bit clever with my framing. First of all, I'm saying it's been developed by a university, Trinity College Dublin, in collaboration with a large hospital. I'm trying to add credibility by saying St James's is the largest hospital in Ireland. So that, has the potential to make people take notice, and has the busiest endoscopy unit in the country. So I'm reaching out to endoscopic units. Could I schedule a call with you or a suitable colleague? If I've reached out to someone and it's not perhaps the right person, at least this is a prompt to them. Okay, it's not me, but it could be, you know, Janet down the road or down the corridor. This is a university technology, stating it outright, and we are therefore not in sales mode. So no ambiguity, hopefully. Rather, we are in the market for good constructive feedback from experts. Always throw the word expert in. Everyone loves being called an expert. With respect to better understanding the problems this technology could solve or the opportunities it could create. Everyone loves talking about problems. So you're inviting someone to speak to you about problems. We'd be very grateful for the opportunity to get your quality feedback on the project at this stage. So it's a relatively short email, and it's not long-winded. It's not in sales mode, and you've been very clear around that. You're looking to speak to the problems. This format works quite well in customer discovery mode. Depending on the idea, and depending on, I suppose, whether there's a problem that they have, that obviously helps, you know, where you're chiming with a problem that they have. But this is an approach that works quite well. And fundamentally, this is all about increasing the probability of them being open to speaking with you. You can see here, not in sales mode, experts and problems. So planning your strategy, so fundamentally, I've already made the point. It's not an opportunity to sell. So you want to approach conversations to learn and being very open and very curious, but very open to learning. So you suspend, for the purposes of customer discovery, you suspend the passion that you might have about your idea. You let go of your attachment to a solution. It's not about you and it's not about the solution. And you replace it with curiosity, high-level curiosity about their problems. You're looking to dig into their work, ask, listen, explore. I've already mentioned bias. You've got to. It's very important that you dial out any bias. So you're avoiding leading questions. You're not seeking validation. You're seeking truth, as I've already indicated. So look, this simple, straightforward stuff, polite and professional. You know, you can do customer discovery quite easily using Teams or Zoom, or in person if there's organizations that are close to you. It's very good, obviously, to be sitting across the table from someone. You can get a much better sense of, you know, their view of the problems perhaps that they exist. You can see their reactions. You can see their likely motivation for a solution much better as well. Telephone next best. And as I've already indicated, this isn't about surveying or questionnaires, etc. So you don't know the real problem yet. You have some sense of what it might be, but you don't know what it is yet. So stay curious around that. And sit down before you have customer discovery conversations. Well, what's the objective here? What are you trying to achieve? Know what you need to learn. For those of you that have never done this before, you know, you might want to just script it a wee bit. You know, just, what am I going to say? And I'm going to give you a structure here. And you know, having scripted it, you might want to test it in people you know. Check your bias. So just be clear in your head. I said to yourself, I want to dial out bias here. It's important that I do. It's in the project's interest that I do. And lean into this discomfort. So there are things that you will hear that you might want to hear, but lean into that, because you probably need to hear it. But that said, you know, quite often I've got feedback that wasn't aligned with an opportunity for a technology, but you know, I won't form a conclusion based on one conversation. You know, I will look for patterns. So I'll take all of the information that I gather up in the round, as opposed to being deterred simply because one person thought that that there was no problem to be addressed. And you know, you'll adapt. So look, different roles may need different questions, etc., etc. Just a reminder, customer discovery is all about really honing in on the right-hand side of the value proposition canvas. So the customer jobs, pains, and gains. The basic structure of the conversation, a big thank you for their time. Very, very important. They're giving you their time. Some context for me would typically be, you know, look, I've got an idea that I'm working on. I'm part of, you know, InnoBoost or whatever, I'm being supported with this idea to explore whether actually there is a market need or not. And in that respect, you know, I really value your open, candid feedback. You know, and you know, we're going to focus in hopefully on the problems. First of all, the present state, how you do things now, and the problems that may or may not exist now. And that should form the first part or segment of the conversation. So for the first 2/3 of the conversation, that's what you want to concentrate on. Okay. And then you can end the conversation with looking for a reaction to your idea. And you don't have to present the idea at all if you don't want to. But it can sometimes be interesting and valuable to present an idea. So I did a project there recently on a simple, relatively simple wind energy generating device. Not a wind turbine, but something slightly different that was relatively low cost compared to wind turbine. And you know, we presented a few conceptual images of the device and sought a reaction to it. And it was very, very valuable information that we got back, because the information that we got was clear around where this could be deployed. You know, they were able to say to us, you could deploy this on the frame of a solar panel. So this could generate energy when solar can't. You know, or this could be deployed on a telecoms mast. You know, whereby there's a big drive towards self-powering telephone masts. And so by looking for a reaction to the solution, they were able to give us some fairly valuable use cases, which ultimately informed a primary focus of co-location for the device. Instead of trying to stick this on top of the chimney of a house, it gave us, you know, some fabulous direction around where it could be deployed. And again, you're inviting candid or blunt feedback. Okay. Some, you know, so good structure for these conversations. As I've already indicated, understand present state. What do you do now in the context of jobs, pains, and gains? What are you trying to achieve? What are your customer jobs? What are your top 2 or 3 challenges in the context of what you're trying to achieve? How often do these challenges occur? Tell me about the last time it happened. What did you do? Explore workarounds and impact. What have you done to solve this? Or how have you tried to solve this? What did or didn't work about those attempts? If they've tried something, or if they've purchased something, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that solution? Why is a very powerful question in customer discovery. So why is very good to ask to understand the motivations. You have a problem, you particularly have a problem. Can you give me any sense of what the consequence of that problem is? Knock-on effect, or what the cost of the problem is. Some people might be reluctant to get into detail around cost of problems. They may not have it on the tip of their tongue or in their head. They might have to go and dig it out, or they might just be slightly reluctant because, I mean, obviously, if I'm speaking to a hospital about a problem and they're telling me the problem costs them $2.5 million a year, they may not want that to go out into the public domain. So there might be a reluctance to share information, and that's fine. Gauge priority and openness. So is solving this problem a priority right now? Always a good question to ask. Because they might articulate, yes, I have a problem, and there's a consequence to that problem. But fundamentally, if there's a long list of problems that need to be solved before this problem, then this may not be a priority. So it'll be good for you to ask the question to know, what would a good solution achieve for you? If you had a magic wand, what would the ideal solution look like? And I experienced this recently, asking a question, similar question to this, around a software solution. And I got some fantastic feedback around, which informed how the technology might interface with individuals, where we were looking at a software solution that could be conversational, having a dialogue. And this individual, who's an expert in his field, give me a little bit of information that sort of informed me around how the solution might operate effectively, and it was gold. Would you be open to reviewing a future concept? Would you be open to trialing an early stage version of this, or providing feedback? Letters of support can be good. A lot of early stage ideas are looking for funding, so a letter of support can be a very good endorsement from a reputable organization. So you don't want to miss the opportunity to ask for that if the conversation has determined that, yes, the problems exist, yes, there's a motivation for a solution, yes, this sounds very interesting what you're proposing. A letter of support can be good to gather up. Bad questions. Would you switch if something cheaper or more effective was available? So you're leading there, you're not pitching, and you're certainly not listening. Would you buy a product which did X? It's hypothetical. People are bad at predicting their own behavior. Would you pay X for a product which did Y? So price questions can be unreliable without the real world context. Would you ever, very vague and speculative, ask what they've done, not what they might do? Again, you know, we spoke with Samsung. They loved it. What do you think? Anchors the conversation, and you'll only hear validation. So again, it's leading. I assume you two have this problem. You too have this problem. It's not a question, it's a trap. Don't assume that they have a problem. Go in there with no assumptions around, well, okay, you'll have your own assumptions around what we've already talked about, but the questions are going to be open. So you're not going to be saying, okay, we know you have these problems, tell us about it. You want them to tell you that they have the problem. And at the end of the conversation, and only at the end of the conversation, just to avoid the bias trap, you can, if you choose, seek a reaction to your solution. So you can high level it, a high level description. What's your view or their view of your solution? If they come back and say, no, don't think that would work, why would that not work? Give me a good view as to why, or why would it work? Would it be of value? Get them talking about whether it would or wouldn't be of value and why. You know, what would make it better? And I've already alluded to that in terms of that suggestion around how technology might interface. Have you any other thoughts? You know, is there any questions that I haven't asked that perhaps you might have a insight around? And always, you know, because you want to have a number of these conversations. So you do want to ask the question, is there someone you can think of that I should be talking to? Can you suggest someone that would be good for me to speak with? It's a good way of getting a referral to someone that might be very knowledgeable. 5 Whys, I'll not dwell too much on this. 5 Whys is a technique from Toyota and Kaizen. And it's drilling into the core root cause motivation. So simple one here, why is turnaround time for diagnostic results a significant challenge for your lab, if that's been articulated? Because clinicians are often waiting on us to make treatment decisions, and delays can impact patient care. Why do these delays typically happen in your lab? Our process involves many manual steps, and any bottleneck along the way slows down the entire workflow. Why are there so many manual steps in your workflow? We're working with older equipment, requires manual input and oversight at multiple stages. Why haven't you upgraded that equipment to more automated or streamlined? Budget constraints make it difficult. Management prioritizes other areas over upgrading our tools. Why do you believe budget constraints consistently prevent equipment upgrades? Because funding decisions are based on short-term costs rather than long-term efficiency gains. So we don't have enough data or metrics to justify the return on investment for newer technology. That can point you to opportunity if you can help someone to present information that might justify a purchase. But fundamentally, the first response is a symptom. Second response is a symptom. Third and fourth responses are symptoms. The last response, by adopting approach of the 5 whys, is your root cause. And you're always in a stronger position when you're addressing the root cause of an issue. Is it a really big problem? How many people have the problem? Is it a big enough market? Can you scale? All useful considerations. How much time or money is spent or lost because of the problem? Obviously, a big pain, more money being spent on it is more likely. In all likelihood, there's more of a willingness to pay for a fix. How well, I've already mentioned, how well is our current solution working? And trying to understand the motivation if something better or more efficient was to come along. And the whole external market drivers, I'm going to talk about this in a subsequent session later on in the week, the whole external environment. And wrapping up, is there anything I didn't ask that I should know? Is there anyone else I should be talking to I've mentioned? Can I follow up with you? It could be that you might want to circle back. There could be a good trial partner. The whole letter of support thing also. And saying thank you. Again, not forgetting that they have given you your time. It's just a checklist. You can go through this yourself. I'm not going to go through it. You'll have the slides. Checklist of good customer discovery habits and common customer discovery mistakes. And then reflect on all of the conversations you had. What validated your thinking or reinforced it? What contradicted your thinking? Any points of interest? What surprised you that you didn't anticipate? What didn't you catch in the moment? Identifying your key takeaways and determining next steps. How does this change my next interview? Because you should be keeping your value proposition canvas and your business model canvas up to date, keeping it live, and new insights should be incorporated and built within it. So you'll find that some of your initial assumptions were incorrect, as we already indicated, but you'll also there'll be new insights to ponder, which may involve pains and gains, may actually involve who you thought your customer was. Your customer could be someone completely different, or the use case. So update your canvas, as I've indicated, and use those validated insights in your subsequent interviews. So you're hypothesizing, you're testing with interviews, you're assessing and analyzing, you're adjusting, you're pivoting if needed. You're updating your canvas. The whole ethos of lean startup methodology being brought to bear using these tools. And customer discovery is an important part of that.
Leah's on us. I can see Leah on the call. Hi, Leah.
Morning.
How are you? Well, I'll just give you a little short introduction, should I say, first of all. Well, as I spoke about yesterday, Leah is joining us, and Leah Fletcher is a passionate leader known for building exceptional teams and driving complex startups and meeting formidable challenges with a vision and determination. Leah is the managing director of 2 companies, Dunbar Pharmaceuticals and Dinano, and they're 2 research-driven companies specializing in manufacturing and distribution of niche plant-based pharmaceutical ingredients for the global market. So, Leah, I'll let you tell the rest of your story from then.
Thanks, Hannah. I'll have to
live up to that.
A more concise intro for people. Wasn't it? Sorry, I was a bit late. Clearly, I'm really good at companies, but not good at Zoom.
Not a problem. It took me a while, as it always does, to wrap up. or as my wife would say, it takes, you know, getting me to shut up can be a difficulty. So I've just finished there now, Leah, so pleasure to hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks a million. Thanks a million. So Anna, I suppose you just want me to go through a little bit of a story about. Oh, she's on mute. Sorry.
You're on
Anna.
mute there, Anna.
Hi, Leah. Just about your own market validation and customer discovery, you know, where did you find your customers?
I'll give them the very high level synopsis, I think, first on just how I ended up where I ended up. I was living in Canada, primary school teacher, and had just become a mom and decided I didn't want to be a school teacher for the next 20 years. And my husband said, why don't you go to some conferences and see what you want to do? And I ended up at a huge medical cannabis conference in Vancouver and was into reg and compliance and policy, had studied it at master's level, yada, yada. So kind of figured that could be my niche, and ended up at that conference getting a gig as a contractor for a major company, public company. And I supported them in looking at pharmaceutical regulatory compliance in Europe and tech transfer for their product. Very, very niche, very weird. Nobody else was mad enough to look at it, but I was mad enough to look at it. Learned an awful lot from that work, was back and forth between Canada and Europe. Realized that in Ireland, companies weren't really focusing on plant-based innovations, which is something that in North America was very forward thinking at the time, not just cannabis, but talk lavender, peppermint, eucalyptus, etc., etc. So I started studying that a little bit, decided that we would move into a consultancy, started servicing more companies, did that for a year or two, realized that there was a niche opportunity in Ireland for a plant-based skincare and wellness range. So launched that at the same time, did background information and customer studies and market studies for a more niche pharmaceutical product. So we launched the skincare product in November, October, during COVID. That first month, we realized that the key that people wanted at that time was to be well at home, to have lovely product that made them feel good. They wanted direct delivery to their house. The shops were all closed down. My first month with Didanu, I did 10,000 euro within the month, and it continued like that, and it continued to grow month on month throughout COVID. When the shops opened, my sales tanked completely, and I had to restructure it and start selling into hotels, spas, gift shops. So I had to build the business again and understand a different set of customers, which were my commercial B2B customers. So that was a learning curve. While all that was going on, I was building infrastructure for a pharmaceutical product. We realized that there was a gap in the market for something that would replace opioids that was plant-based, and that was a product called dronabinol. We worked on licenses, mandates from the government, regulatory compliance for like 3 years. Went through all that while I was still running the Didanu brand, because you have to keep things alive and make sure your kids aren't eating beans. Did that. Didanu was taking away. We have placement in some major hotels. We're exporting with Didanu, but now it's become my background project, so to speak, because the other business took off. And the other business now is exporting to the UK and Germany as a pharmaceutical API that goes into drug manufacturers who make finished dose products for patients with cancer, MS, Parkinson's, chronic pain, to reduce their reliance on opioids for the most part. The interesting thing about learning about our market with the pharma product was that there was huge regulatory barriers that was stopping people supplying it. but a massive demand from a patient-based perspective and a prescriber-based perspective. In order to get information about the product and how to sell it was quite complicated. We had to first go speak with prescribing doctors, clinics, hospitals to see what they prescribe this product. It's basically a very, very clean compound from the cannabis plant. So we extract from the cannabis plant and we take out one particular molecule, we clean it up, it looks like a pharmaceutical, it's clear, and then it can be put into finished dosage. What we needed to understand was how was it prescribed. We needed to understand how it was then put into finished dosage forms, and we needed to understand what the patients needed as well. So it wasn't just looking at one particular buyer or customer, it was looking at 4 or 5 people throughout the supply chain and how to make sure they were all happy. So that was quite interesting. Both companies are way different to each other, but the same skill set would need to be applied. You still have to pitch your product. You still have to know the ins and outs of your product and why people should convert from whatever they're doing to your product. For the most part, the key thing that I learned for acquiring customers or acquiring deals and contracts was to just have a relationship built on trust with the person that I'm dealing with and having my one-to-one with. So for the most part, I love sales. I love talking to the customer. I don't look at it like sales. I look at it as how can we make a solution for this person? How can we make their lives easier? How can I make sure that I do everything that I say I can do and deliver on time? So I don't know if that's a benefit to anybody, but it's a very, very weird road that I had from primary school teacher to now.
It certainly is.
To now a CEO of a pharmaceutical company. Everyone thought I was mental. I've 32 staff for that project as of today, and we're still hiring. We're hiring about 2 every quarter right now. So it's growing quite quickly. I've only recently got the support of, say, the likes of Enterprise Ireland. So that's been great. I did Enterprise Ireland programs in the early stage of the project. And now they're helping us with the export markets. So we're unusual in that we manufacture in Ireland. Usually pharmaceutical companies bring the product over, or they're just packaging, or they're finishing, or they're global, or they're an American company, but we're a true Irish pharmaceutical company start exporting. So it's unusual, and it's unusual for a primary school teacher to set it up, but anything can happen, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant story, Leah. Leah, and you know, your point is well made there around how can you ensure that you're making life easier for customers, and that's, I suppose, one of the core aspects of what we're talking about today is that whole area of customer discovery. So at the early idea stage, understanding, you know, well, how does the customer do things now? And what are the challenges that they're experiencing with how they do things now? What are the consequences of those challenges? What are the problems that, you know, that are arising on the back of all of that? And gathering up as much of that information as possible to allow you to determine how you should move forward. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. I just had a customer call actually just before I hopped onto this. And before the customer call, I had my market analysis guy in Germany go and speak with somebody in that business to understand exactly how that business works and who their relationships are, who they're currently sourcing from, how much they're buying for, how much are they selling for, what pain points have they, are things being delivered on time. So he did that work all last week. And then just before the call, I had time with him for him to give me all of that information before I went into the call. So I hate saying that I'm pitching to customers. I hate it. So I never pitch. But I went into the call and I loosely talked about their problems, but didn't talk about their problems. I said, you know what, we can always be in stock. We can always be on time. We can provide you with buffer stock. You're never going to have that issue. She doesn't know that I know details about their supplier being out of stock right now from my guy last week, but it worked, right? And she perked up and said, that would be amazing, because, you know, right now it's troublesome and might take 5-6 weeks for us to get the stock back in. So I've instantly solved an issue for her. One of the things that's interesting for us with the pharmaceutical product is we have gone into the market as the most expensive version of our product, and people thought we were mad. The customers don't care. They want it to be on time, reliable, consistent, high quality, no regulatory issues. So we battled with it in the beginning because the culture in relation to this product was, it needs to be cheap. It needs to be cheap, because there was governance issues in relations to public reimbursement and insurance. But we stood our ground, and as a result, the company might be worth 2-3 times more than what other people may have thought we would have been worth, just because we stuck to our guns with pricing, and we realized that sales isn't about price most of the time. It's about being able to fulfill that need. So yeah.
But it's understanding your value proposition.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and understanding what it's worth to your
Yeah.
customers.
Exactly.
And knowing you can command a premium price on the back of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, say for my skincare project, my best-selling product is a face cream that's 68 euros. It's expensive, but it works, right? And pricing is important there as well. And people would say, you might sell more if you sell it for 40. Absolutely not, under no circumstance, because I have a hand cream that's 40 euro. So if someone doesn't want to spend 68 euro for the face cream, 40 euro is a deal. It's a bargain. So there's different strategies there with that brand than there is to the pharma, but same kind of psychology applies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming one of the topics that we're going to be talking about, Leah, tomorrow, or I can't remember, tomorrow or the next day, is the market environment.
Is
So
say what?
Is the market environment. So,
Yes.
you know, you're obviously, what we're talking about here is the customers and the problems and challenges they have. But the market environment is obviously a very important consideration in the context, I suppose, of what you've just said there. What are the alternative products that are out there, the competing products? What do they do? What are their pluses and minuses? What are they charging? And why might you be in a position to differentiate your offering, and what value proposition might have, and what you know, how does that inform how you price, etc., etc.?
Yeah. That's something that we closely monitor. So we have not so much for the skincare brand, but definitely for the pharmaceutical company, we have major, huge spreadsheets tracking products that maybe not are exactly our product, but products that would be in the same categories to a certain extent. We watch price points, price per milligram, availability, who's selling it, who's buying it, what are they getting it through telemedicine? Are they getting it direct at bricks and mortar doctors? Is it hospital clinics? And then when we look at that, we also need to look at the regulatory environment, or even economic, political environment in relation to the product. So, for example, Germany, our main market, they have been quite choppy from a policy and regulatory perspective for the last 5-6 years. They went through political disruption, say 6 months ago, where there was proposed policies that then kind of were falling backwards, and we had to keep an eye on that really, really closely, because it could have affected us quite significantly if it went one way or the other. So you can't ignore it. And it's interesting when you start exporting, because from a cultural perspective, you mightn't always understand what is going on. So the key thing for us in that market was having people boots on the ground in Germany who were German, who were in that industry, because very, very difficult to do it otherwise. Yeah.
And Leah, I know that you have another call at 11 o'clock because you're super busy. But I suppose one last question, because some people in this call are very new, you know, are only starting their journey or thinking about their journey or their ideas. What would be your number one lesson in going from an idea of a primary school teacher, as such as you said, and bringing that to life? Like, how did you become brave?
A bit of mad. You need to be a little bit mad, but that's okay. You do need to be a little bit mad. I think the main thing is, if you can become really, really good at one thing and have a niche that you're exceptional at, then that's what you leverage. But I would say there's no point in being excellent at something unless you're a good communicator. So if communication is something that you struggle with, whether written, oral, or otherwise, those would be the two things that I figure have helped me. So are you good at writing? Do you know exactly how to put forward an email in a concise way that someone is going to grab it? Everything else you can learn, because I've learned an awful lot. I had to teach myself organic chemistry and validation and GMP. But my niche was always, and the thing that I was known for was regulatory compliance. So that was the thing I would hook people with in the beginning. Like I've raised a couple of million euro for my project, and I wouldn't have raised that money if A, I didn't have a niche that I was excellent at, and B, I wasn't able to communicate.
Yeah.
And Leah, I know Barry has his hand up, so I think Barry might have a quick question before you fly off.
I'll make it quick. Thanks a million, Leah. I love your story. It's great. I've learned recently like that the importance of having the right people around you to start is important, as well as the communication, of course. How many people did you have when you started out? Who were part of your business,
great question.
Who were your employees, or how did that work?
Also, this will show how mad we are as well. My husband came into the business straight away with me, so we both left our good jobs and went into this. He's a chartered accountant, CFO. He does all the things that I hate: spreadsheets, Excel, banking, admin, all that horrible stuff. He's class, great at that. So he came in straight away. Maybe 5-6 months actually after I started Dodanu. When the money started rolling in with Dodanu, he was like, maybe there's something here, right? So he came in on it. The first official employee we had was my dad. So my dad's an industrial electrician, and he was doing fit outs for Big Pharma. And I called him and I said, I'm after taking on a factory and I need to get it up and running within the next 18 months. I've no money. I can't pay you. But I promise it'll work. And in about 6 months to a year, we'll have some money. And he said, pick me up in 15 minutes. And I drove down to the back of Alchemez, now Novo Nordisk, and he was there with the toolbox. He threw the keys into the van in with the lads, and he came up. So he was the first. Now I have to say, if I didn't have those two, this wouldn't have happened. They were the most important. After that, we hired 2. They didn't work out. They're not here anymore because I wasn't good at hiring. I was not good. I needed coaching. I didn't have the life experience. So what I would say, and what I'm really good at now, is getting my board of directors, who are guys with a lot of white hair, to look at key hires for me. Now I have gotten better, but if I'm hiring someone for a C-suite position in the next few months, it'll go via my board and they'll meet this person. Because, okay, I'm not 21, but I still don't have the experience that some of these guys have from a senior level management perspective. Like we really, really struggled in the beginning to hire because people thought we were mad, and seasoned pharmaceutical employees aren't going to move to some weird medical cannabis startup in Athlone that the founder is a primary school teacher. They did. I have them now, but those first couple of months were really, really tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so marry an accountant, and
I really don't recommend marrying an accountant.
Thanks very much, Leah.
Thanks so much, Leah, for your time today.
Yeah,
really
anytime.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Thanks a million. Thanks for your
Thank you,
story.
Leah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all. Bye-bye.